Your soulmate is facing family pressure because of you. Don't skip. Listen carefully. The evening arrived quietly, almost as though the world itself had decided to slow down. The last rays of sunlight stretched across the horizon, painting the sky with gentle shades of gold, rose, and lavender. A cool breeze drifted through the open windows of nearby homes, carrying the comforting scent of blooming flowers and fresh rain that had fallen earlier in the day. Birds returned to their nests. Streetlights flickered to life one by one. Children finished their games and hurried home before darkness settled over the neighborhood. Everything looked wonderfully ordinary. Nothing suggested that, behind the walls of one quiet home, someone sat carrying a burden that no one else could fully see. Because your heart needs this right now, because many of life's greatest challenges happen quietly, far away from public attention. For many weeks, perhaps even months, they had been carrying two kinds of love inside their heart. One was the love and respect they held for their family. The people who had raised them, encouraged them, protected them through difficult seasons. The other was the deep appreciation they felt for someone who had entered their life and quietly helped them become a kinder, wiser, and more hopeful person. Neither love was wrong. Neither deserved to be ignored. Yet balancing both sometimes felt impossible. Because your heart needs this right now, because life occasionally asks us to navigate complicated emotions with wisdom instead of haste. Every evening followed a familiar rhythm. Dinner was shared around the table. Stories from the day were exchanged. Parents offered advice. Siblings laughed about small misunderstandings. The house remained filled with warmth. Yet beneath every ordinary conversation, unspoken questions quietly lingered. What does the future look like? What choices should be made? What matters most? Those questions weren't asked with anger. They were asked with concern. Concern often sounds different depending on the person speaking. Sometimes it appears as caution. Sometimes as advice. Sometimes as silence. Because your heart needs this right now, because people often express care imperfectly, even when their intentions are sincere. One evening, after everyone had finished dinner, they quietly helped clear the table. The dishes were washed. The kitchen slowly became quiet. Outside, the first stars appeared overhead. One family member gently asked, "You've seemed thoughtful lately." They smiled politely. "I've just been thinking." The answer was honest, yet incomplete. There were feelings that still felt difficult to explain. Not because they wished to hide them forever, but because finding the right words sometimes takes time. Because your heart needs this right now, because honest conversations often begin with quiet reflection. Later that night, they stepped outside into the peaceful garden behind the house. The cool evening air felt refreshing. Moonlight rested softly across the flowers. A wooden bench stood beneath an old tree that had watched countless seasons come and go. Sitting there, they allowed themselves to breathe deeply. No phone. No distractions. Only silence. Sometimes silence isn't empty. Sometimes it becomes the place where courage quietly begins growing. Because your heart needs this right now, because clarity often arrives when we create space to listen to our own hearts. Resting beside the bench was a familiar leather notebook. Its pages held years of memories. Dreams written during hopeful seasons. Questions recorded during uncertain nights. Prayers whispered during difficult moments. Gratitude preserved after unexpected blessings. Turning those pages felt like meeting every earlier version of themselves. The version who feared disappointing others. The version who believed every difficult conversation would end badly. The version who thought avoiding conflict was always the safest choice. And finally, the version beginning to understand that kindness and honesty could exist together. Because your heart needs this right now, because emotional growth often begins when fear no longer controls our decisions. Opening to a blank page, they slowly began writing. Tonight I feel grateful. They paused. Then continued. I am grateful for my family. I am grateful for the people who have encouraged me. I am grateful for everyone who has helped me become a better person. After another thoughtful pause they added. I don't want love to become something that creates division. I want it to become something that inspires understanding. Reading those words filled their heart with quiet peace. Because your heart needs this right now, because healthy relationships grow strongest when guided by gratitude instead of fear. The following morning arrived wrapped in golden sunlight. Birds greeted the sunrise with cheerful songs. The familiar bakery filled the neighborhood with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Children laughed while walking to school. Neighbors greeted one another while watering colorful gardens. Everything looked beautifully ordinary once again. Yet inside one heart, the questions remained. Not frightening questions. Important ones. Questions that deserve thoughtful answers rather than hurried reactions. Because your heart needs this right now, because important decisions deserve patience. Later that morning they visited the familiar park where they often found peace whenever life became confusing. Towering oak trees stretched confidently toward the bright blue sky. Gentle breezes danced through their branches. The peaceful lake reflected drifting clouds like polished glass. Families spread picnic blankets beneath shady trees. Children chased butterflies through blooming flower beds. Everything invited stillness. Finding the familiar wooden bench overlooking the lake, they quietly sat. Instead of searching desperately for immediate solutions, they simply observed life. Because your heart needs this right now, because peaceful hearts often recognize wisdom more clearly than anxious minds. Nearby, an elderly grandfather patiently helped his granddaughter build a small wooden bridge across a narrow stream. Halfway through, one side collapsed. The little girl frowned. I ruined it. The grandfather smiled kindly. No. We simply discovered where it needs to become stronger. Together they carefully rebuilt the weak section. Watching them stirred something deep inside. Relationships sometimes reveal places where stronger communication is needed. That doesn't always mean they are broken. Sometimes they are simply growing. Because your heart needs this right now, because challenges often reveal opportunities to build stronger foundations. The morning slowly became afternoon. Walking beside the peaceful lake, they noticed an elderly woman reading beneath a flowering tree. After exchanging warm greetings, she gently closed her book. I've learned something after many years, she said. What is it? They asked. She smiled softly. Love doesn't ask us to stop respecting our family. And healthy families don't ask us to stop growing. She paused before adding. The difficult part is learning how to communicate with patience. Those words lingered long after they continued walking. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding often begins with patient conversations rather than quick conclusions. Later they wandered into the community flower garden. Rows of roses, daisies, lilies, lavender, and sunflowers stretched beneath the warm afternoon sunshine. An elderly gardener carefully removed tiny weeds growing between healthy flowers. Curious, they asked. Why remove them while they're still so small? The gardener smiled warmly. Because little misunderstandings become larger if they're ignored. He continued watering the flowers before adding. Relationships need regular care. So do families. So do friendships. So do hearts. Those simple words quietly settled into their spirit. Because your heart needs this right now, because trust grows through consistent care, honesty, and understanding. The afternoon breeze carried soft piano music from a nearby community gathering. Only a handful of visitors paused to listen. Still, every melody filled the air with quiet beauty. Watching the musician reminded them that many of life's greatest strengths never compete for attention. Integrity grows quietly. Patience grows quietly. Compassion grows quietly. Respect grows quietly. Hope grows quietly. Yet together they quietly transform relationships. Because your heart needs this right now, because gentle character often has the greatest influence. Returning once more to the familiar bench overlooking the lake, they opened the notebook again. Today's page slowly filled. Today I discovered something important. Pressure doesn't always mean people are against us. Sometimes it means everyone is trying, in imperfect ways, to protect what they believe is valuable. The answer isn't anger. The answer isn't silence. The answer begins with listening, honesty, patience, and respect. Reading those words filled their eyes with peaceful tears. Not tears of sadness, but tears of understanding. Because they realized the situation wasn't about choosing one side over another. It was about learning how to build bridges instead of walls. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting relationships are strengthened by empathy and thoughtful communication. As evening slowly returned, golden sunlight reflected across the calm lake. Families packed picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the water, they reflected on the title of this story. Your soulmate is facing family pressure because of you. A gentle smile crossed their face. The story was never meant to claim that a real soulmate is currently experiencing this situation. Instead, it symbolized a challenge many people face, trying to balance personal relationships, family expectations, and their own values with wisdom and compassion. The real journey wasn't about choosing conflict. It was about choosing understanding. Because your heart needs this right now, because healthy relationships grow strongest when honesty and kindness walk together. That evening they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will listen before I react. Tomorrow I will speak honestly with kindness. Tomorrow I will seek understanding instead of assumptions. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone whose heart reflects patience, gratitude, humility, compassion, and hope." They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities to understand one another would appear. And for the first time in many seasons, they no longer feared difficult conversations. Because they had discovered that even during seasons of pressure, respect, patience, and honest communication can become the beginning of healing. And listen to this. The following morning arrived with the gentle stillness that often follows a long night of reflection. Soft rays of sunlight slipped through the curtains, filling the room with warm shades of gold. A cool breeze drifted through the open window carrying the fragrance of blooming flowers, fresh rain, and the comforting sounds of birds welcoming another day. Outside, the neighborhood slowly awakened. The familiar bakery unlocked its doors before sunrise, filling the streets with the aroma of warm bread. Children hurried toward school with backpacks bouncing behind them. Neighbors smiled as they watered colorful gardens and greeted one another. Everything appeared beautifully ordinary. Yet inside one heart, today felt different. Not because every problem had disappeared, but because they had decided something important. They would no longer allow silence to speak louder than honesty. Because your heart needs this right now, because difficult conversations often become easier once we decide they matter more than our fears. Breakfast that morning was quieter than usual. The family gathered around the table. Warm tea filled small cups. Fresh bread rested in the center beside fruit and homemade jam. Ordinary conversation filled the room. Someone talked about work. Someone mentioned weekend plans. Someone laughed about a funny memory from years ago. Everything felt familiar. Yet beneath those ordinary conversations rested unspoken emotions. Not anger. Not resentment. Simply uncertainty. Sometimes uncertainty creates distance even between people who deeply care for one another. Because your heart needs this right now, because love sometimes needs honest conversations to overcome confusion. After breakfast, they helped wash the dishes before quietly stepping outside. The cool morning air felt refreshing. They walked slowly toward the familiar park where they had spent many afternoons reflecting during life's important seasons. Towering oak trees stretched confidently toward the bright blue sky. Gentle breezes danced through their branches. The peaceful lake reflected drifting clouds like polished glass. Children laughed while feeding ducks near the shoreline. Families spread picnic blankets beneath shady trees. Everything invited patience. Finding the familiar wooden bench overlooking the lake, they quietly sat. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening?" they found themselves asking, "How can I respond with wisdom?" Because your heart needs this right now, because changing our questions often changes our perspective. Resting beside them was the familiar leather notebook. Its pages had become faithful companions through many seasons. Inside were dreams, questions, prayers, lessons, moments of gratitude. Turning those pages reminded them how much life had already taught them. There had been seasons of joy, seasons of disappointment, moments of confidence, moments of fear. Every chapter had quietly shaped the person they were becoming. Opening to a fresh page, they slowly wrote, "Today I choose understanding before defensiveness." They paused. Then added, "I want every important conversation to begin with respect." Reading those simple words brought unexpected peace. Because your heart needs this right now, because respect opens doors that arguments often keep closed. Later that afternoon, they returned home. The opportunity they had quietly hoped for finally arrived. Several family members gathered together in the living room. The television remained off. Phones rested on a nearby table. For once, there were no distractions. Only people. Only conversation. Only an opportunity to listen. One family member gently asked, "You've seemed thoughtful lately." Instead of changing the subject, they smiled softly. "I have." Another quiet moment passed. Then they continued, "I think it's time we talked honestly." The room became still. No one interrupted. No one argued. Everyone simply listened. Because your heart needs this right now, because healing often begins with someone choosing courage first. The conversation unfolded slowly. No dramatic speeches. No raised voices. No accusations. Instead, there were questions. Thoughtful questions. Family members shared concerns. Not because they wanted control, but because they cared deeply. One person quietly admitted, "We've worried about you." Another added, "We only want you to be happy." Hearing those words changed something. The pressure they had been feeling suddenly looked different. Concern had sometimes sounded like criticism. Fear had sometimes sounded like disapproval. Yet underneath those imperfect expressions remained genuine care. Because your heart needs this right now, because people sometimes communicate love imperfectly. Taking a deep breath, they finally shared their own heart. "I understand why you're concerned. I appreciate everything you've done for me. I'll always respect our family." They paused before continuing. "But I also hope you'll trust that I'm trying to make thoughtful decisions." Silence filled the room once more. Not uncomfortable silence. Reflective silence. Sometimes the most meaningful conversations include quiet moments where everyone has space to think. Because your heart needs this right now, because listening is just as important as speaking. As the afternoon continued, everyone gradually relaxed. The conversation became less about disagreement, more about understanding. Stories were shared. Old memories resurfaced. Laughter unexpectedly returned. Someone remembered difficult seasons the family had overcome together years earlier. Another smiled while recalling how patience had helped them through another challenge. Slowly, hope replaced tension. Not because every answer had been found, but because everyone finally felt heard. Because your heart needs this right now, because feeling understood often brings peace even before problems are solved. Later that evening they returned once more to the familiar park. The setting sun painted the sky with brilliant shades of orange, pink, and violet. Gentle breezes moved across the calm lake. Finding the familiar wooden bench, they quietly sat. Nearby, an elderly carpenter carefully repaired a small wooden footbridge. A curious child asked, "Why don't you build a brand new bridge?" The carpenter smiled kindly. "This bridge still has a strong foundation. It only needed careful repairs." Those words settled deeply into their heart. Relationships often resemble that bridge. Time leaves marks. Misunderstandings leave cracks. Difficult conversations reveal weaknesses. Yet honesty, patience, respect, and compassion can restore what fear once threatened to divide. Because your heart needs this right now, because strong relationships are often strengthened through restoration rather than perfection. The afternoon slowly became evening. Walking beside the lake, they noticed an elderly woman reading beneath a flowering tree. After exchanging greetings, she gently closed her book. "I've learned something after many years," she said. "What is it?" they asked. She smiled warmly. "Families don't always need perfect agreement. They need people willing to keep loving each other while working through differences." Those simple words remained long after the conversation ended. Because your heart needs this right now, because love becomes strongest when respect continues during disagreement. Later they wandered through the community flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, lavender, daisies, and sunflowers stretched beneath the fading sunlight. An elderly gardener carefully watered each flower before gently removing tiny weeds. Curious, they asked, "How do you keep the garden so healthy?" The gardener smiled. "I don't wait until problems become too large. I care for it every day." Those words quietly echoed inside. Relationships are living gardens. Honesty is water. Respect is sunlight. Patience is rich soil. Forgiveness removes weeds before bitterness has time to grow. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful relationships flourish through consistent care. As evening settled over the park, soft violin music drifted through the cool air. Only a handful of visitors stopped to listen. Still, every melody filled the quiet evening with remarkable beauty. Watching the musician reminded them that life's greatest qualities rarely demand recognition. Integrity grows quietly. Compassion grows quietly. Patience grows quietly. Humility grows quietly. Hope grows quietly. Yet together, they quietly transform families. Because your heart needs this right now, because gentle character often changes hearts more deeply than force ever could. Returning once more to the familiar bench, they opened the notebook again. Today's page slowly filled. Today I discovered something important. Pressure becomes easier to carry when people begin listening. Respect invites understanding. Kindness softens difficult conversations. Families grow stronger when everyone feels safe enough to speak honestly. Reading those words brought peaceful tears. Not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. They realized that today's conversation had not been about winning. It had been about understanding one another. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful conversations build bridges instead of walls. As darkness slowly covered the peaceful lake, stars appeared one by one across the night sky. Families gathered their picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing quietly beside the water, they reflected once more on the title of this story. Your soulmate is facing family pressure because of you. A gentle smile crossed their face. This story was never meant to claim that a real soulmate is currently experiencing this situation. Instead, it symbolized the reality that many relationships face moments where family expectations, personal hopes, and honest communication must be balanced with patience and care. The real turning point wasn't choosing one side over another. It was choosing empathy. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding often grows where compassion leads the conversation. That evening they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will continue listening before speaking. Tomorrow I will protect relationships through honesty and kindness. Tomorrow I will choose patience instead of assumptions. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone whose heart reflects wisdom, humility, gratitude, compassion, and hope." They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars shimmered across the peaceful night sky. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities to build trust would appear. And for the first time in many seasons, they no longer feared difficult discussions. Because they had discovered that when people choose honesty with respect, even seasons of pressure can become the beginning of deeper understanding and lasting peace. And listen to this. Several peaceful days had passed since the honest family conversation. The world outside continued exactly as it always had. The morning sun still rose above the horizon in gentle shades of gold. Birds welcomed the day with cheerful songs. The neighborhood bakery filled the streets with the comforting aroma of warm bread before sunrise. Children hurried toward school with backpacks bouncing behind them. Neighbors waved while watering flowers and tending small gardens. Everything looked wonderfully ordinary. Yet inside one heart, everything had quietly changed. The pressure had not completely disappeared. Questions still remained. Different opinions still existed. But something important had changed. Silence no longer controlled the situation. Because your heart needs this right now, because healing often begins long before every problem is solved. That morning began without rushing. A warm cup of tea rested beside the kitchen window. Soft sunlight stretched across the wooden table. Instead of worrying about tomorrow, they simply watched the neighborhood awaken. Across the street, an elderly couple carefully planted young flowers together. Neither hurried. Neither complained. Each quietly cared for the garden they had built over many years. Watching them stirred another realization. Strong relationships are rarely built during easy seasons. They are strengthened by choosing patience through difficult ones. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting love grows stronger through consistent care. After breakfast they reached once again for the familiar leather notebook resting quietly on the bookshelf. Its worn cover reflected years of faithful use. Inside were dreams written during hopeful seasons. Questions recorded during lonely nights. Prayers whispered through uncertain moments. Pages filled with gratitude after ordinary blessings. Turning those pages reminded them how much life had already taught them. Every difficult chapter had quietly become preparation for greater wisdom. Opening to a fresh page, they slowly wrote, "Today I choose patience." After a thoughtful pause they continued, "Not every answer arrives immediately. Some relationships need time to grow stronger." Reading those simple words filled the room with unexpected peace. Because your heart needs this right now, because patience allows trust to develop naturally. Later that morning they returned to the familiar park. The towering oak tree stretched confidently toward the bright blue sky. Its branches swayed gently beneath the summer breeze. The peaceful lake reflected drifting clouds like polished glass. Children laughed while feeding ducks along the shoreline. Families gathered beneath shady trees sharing ordinary conversations. Everything invited stillness. Finding the familiar wooden bench overlooking the lake, they quietly sat. Instead of searching for quick solutions, they appreciated how far everyone had already come. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude helps us recognize progress that fear often overlooks. Nearby, a grandfather patiently helped his granddaughter complete a large jigsaw puzzle. One small piece seemed impossible to place. "I think it's missing," the little girl whispered. The grandfather smiled gently. "It isn't missing. We simply haven't found where it belongs." Together they searched patiently until the final piece fit perfectly. The little girl laughed with excitement. Watching them stirred another quiet lesson. Sometimes understanding isn't absent. It simply needs patience. Because your heart needs this right now, because some answers reveal themselves only with time. The morning slowly became afternoon. Walking beside the peaceful lake, they noticed an elderly artist quietly painting the landscape. The painting wasn't finished. Large sections remained blank. "It already looks beautiful," they said. The artist smiled warmly. "It will become even better." "How?" "I'm allowing each layer to dry before adding the next." Those simple words lingered. Healing is much the same. Conversations create one layer. Understanding creates another. Trust continues growing through consistency. Nothing meaningful needs to be rushed. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting peace is built one careful step at a time. Later they wandered into the community flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, lavender, daisies, and sunflowers stretched beneath the warm afternoon sunshine. An elderly gardener carefully tied a young climbing vine to a wooden support. Curious, they asked, "Why help it if it's already growing?" The gardener smiled kindly. "Because support helps it grow stronger." Those words quietly echoed inside. Families need support. Relationships need support. People need encouragement. No one grows well in isolation. Because your heart needs this right now, because encouragement strengthens hearts during uncertain seasons. The afternoon breeze carried soft piano music through the park. Only a handful of visitors paused to listen. Still, every melody filled the air with remarkable beauty. Watching the musician reminded them that many of life's greatest qualities never demand attention. Integrity grows quietly. Compassion grows quietly. Patience grows quietly. Humility grows quietly. Hope grows quietly. Yet together they quietly transform relationships. Because your heart needs this right now, because quiet character often creates lasting influence. Returning once more to the familiar bench, they opened the notebook again. Today's page slowly filled. Today I discovered something beautiful. Pressure doesn't always disappear overnight. But trust grows each time people continue choosing kindness. Understanding grows each time someone listens. Families become stronger when everyone feels respected. Reading those words brought peaceful tears. Not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. Because they realized healing had already begun. Because your heart needs this right now, because every respectful conversation becomes another step toward peace. Later that afternoon, another quiet family conversation unfolded. This time, no one entered the room expecting to prove a point. Instead, everyone came willing to understand. One family member admitted, "I've been thinking about what you shared." Another smiled gently. "We may not understand everything yet, but we want to keep talking." Those simple words carry tremendous hope. Nobody promised instant agreement. Nobody demanded immediate decisions. Instead, they promised something far more valuable: to continue listening. Because your heart needs this right now, because relationships flourish when people remain willing to keep communicating. As evening slowly approached, golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. Families packed picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the calm water, they reflected once more on the title of this story. Your soulmate is facing family pressure because of you. A gentle smile crossed their face. The title had never been intended as a prediction. It symbolized a challenge many people experience when balancing family expectations, personal hopes, and meaningful relationships. The real turning point wasn't choosing conflict. It was choosing compassion. Because your heart needs this right now, because empathy builds bridges where fear often builds walls. As twilight settled over the neighborhood, they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will continue choosing patience. Tomorrow I will continue listening with respect. Tomorrow I will protect meaningful relationships through honesty and kindness. Tomorrow I will remember that lasting trust grows slowly. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone whose heart reflects wisdom, humility, compassion, gratitude, forgiveness, and hope." Then they paused before writing one final reflection. Today I learned that healing isn't created by winning arguments. It grows through respectful conversations, patient listening, sincere gratitude, and the willingness to understand one another. Families and meaningful relationships become stronger not because they never face pressure, but because people choose love, empathy, and honesty even when the journey feels difficult. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, countless stars shimmered across the peaceful night sky. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities to strengthen trust would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many seasons, they no longer feared what tomorrow might bring. Because they had discovered that patience, respect, and honest communication can transform even the most difficult seasons into the beginning of lasting peace. The final morning arrived with a peaceful silence unlike any morning before. Golden sunlight slowly poured through the curtains, filling every corner of the room with warm shades of amber and gold. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the fragrance of blooming flowers and the fresh scent of rain from the night before. Outside, birds welcomed the sunrise with cheerful songs. The familiar bakery unlocked its doors before dawn, filling the neighborhood with the comforting aroma of warm bread. Children laughed as they hurried toward school. Neighbors waved while watering colorful gardens and sweeping their front porches. Everything looked wonderfully ordinary. Yet inside one heart, everything had quietly changed. Not because every question had finally been answered. Not because every challenge had disappeared overnight. But because fear no longer controlled the future. Hope had quietly taken its place. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace begins when understanding becomes stronger than uncertainty. That morning there was no hurry. No anxious thoughts. No endless imagining of every possible outcome. Only gratitude. A warm cup of tea rested beside the kitchen window while soft sunlight stretched across the wooden table. Outside, two robins carefully gathered small twigs to strengthen their nest. They returned again and again. One tiny branch at a time. Watching them brought a quiet smile. Strong homes are never built in a single day. Strong relationships aren't either. Trust is built one conversation at a time. Respect grows one decision at a time. Understanding grows one act of patience at a time. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting relationships are built through steady care instead of hurried solutions. After breakfast, they reached once more for the familiar leather notebook resting quietly on the bookshelf. Its worn cover reflected years of faithful use. Inside were dreams written during hopeful seasons. Questions recorded during lonely nights. Prayers whispered through uncertain moments. Pages filled with gratitude after unexpected blessings. Turning each page felt like meeting every version of themselves. The version who feared disappointing others. The version who avoided difficult conversations. The version who believed silence would somehow solve everything. And finally, the version who understood that honest conversations, spoken with kindness, create stronger foundations than silence ever could. Because your heart needs this right now, because emotional growth often begins when courage gently replaces fear. Only one blank page remained. The final page. They rested the pen gently against the paper. For several quiet moments they simply listened. The birds. The breeze. The peaceful rhythm of another ordinary morning. Then they slowly began writing. Today I finally understand. They paused before continuing. Family and love do not have to become enemies. Both deserve respect. Both deserve honesty. Both deserve patience. Another sentence appeared. The strongest bridges are built by people willing to keep listening. Reading those words filled their eyes with peaceful tears. Not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. Because they realized something beautiful. The greatest victory wasn't convincing everyone to agree. It was helping everyone understand one another a little better. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding often becomes the beginning of healing. Later that morning they returned one final time to the familiar park. The towering oak tree stretched confidently toward the brilliant blue sky. Its branches swayed gently beneath the summer breeze. The peaceful lake reflected drifting clouds like polished glass. Children laughed while feeding ducks. Families gathered beneath shady trees sharing meals and stories. Everything invited stillness. Finding the familiar wooden bench overlooking the water, they quietly sat. This time they weren't searching for answers. They simply appreciated how far everyone had already come. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude allows us to recognize progress that worry sometimes hides. Nearby, an elderly carpenter carefully restored an old wooden gate. A curious child watched quietly before asking, "Why don't you build a new one?" The carpenter smiled warmly. Because this gate still has a strong foundation. It simply needs care. The child looked thoughtfully at the weathered wood. So it isn't broken? The carpenter gently shook his head. No. It's simply learning how to stand strong again. Those words settled deeply into their heart. Families can experience misunderstandings. Relationships can experience pressure. Yet respect, patience, compassion, honesty, and forgiveness often reveal that the foundation was stronger than anyone realized. Because your heart needs this right now, because many relationships need understanding more than replacement. The afternoon slowly unfolded. Golden sunlight shimmered across the peaceful lake. A father patiently encouraged his daughter as she learned to ride her bicycle. She lost her balance several times. Each time she stood up smiling. Her father never criticized her. Instead he gently said, "You learned something. Try again." Watching them stirred another quiet lesson. Healthy relationships are places where people feel safe to keep growing. Not places where perfection is expected. Because your heart needs this right now, because encouragement builds confidence more effectively than criticism. Later they wandered into the community flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, lavender, daisies, and sunflowers bloomed beneath the warm afternoon sunshine. An elderly gardener carefully watered every flower before gently removing a few faded leaves. Curious, they asked, "Do flowers all bloom at the same time?" The gardener smiled kindly. "No. Every flower has its own season. But every flower deserves patience." Those simple words lingered. Families grow differently. People heal differently. Understanding arrives at different times for everyone. Healthy relationships make room for those differences. Because your heart needs this right now, because patience allows people to become their best selves. The afternoon breeze carried soft violin music across the park. Only a few visitors paused to listen. Still, every melody filled the air with quiet beauty. Watching the musician reminded them that many of life's greatest strengths rarely seek attention. Integrity grows quietly. Compassion grows quietly. Humility grows quietly. Patience grows quietly. Hope grows quietly. Yet together they quietly transform hearts. Because your heart needs this right now, because quiet goodness often creates the deepest change. Later that evening, another family conversation unfolded. This time the atmosphere felt different. No one entered the room expecting to argue. Everyone entered hoping to understand. One family member smiled gently. "We've all learned something." Another nodded. "We may still have questions. But we don't want fear to make our decisions." Someone quietly added, "We're still a family." Those simple words filled the room with peace. Not because every answer had arrived, but because everyone chose respect over division. Because your heart needs this right now, because unity grows when people remember they are on the same side. Returning home beneath the first evening stars, they opened the notebook one final time.